The streaming videos are posted, and quizzes are being posted as we go on. There's one so far, and I'll get a few more. You'll note the names of the lectures posted as PDF or PowerPoint are Module 1, Lecture 1, Module 1, Lecture 2, or Lecture 2-1 and 2-2. So those should correspond to the Roman numerals on the syllabus. There's about 4, maybe 5 lectures for each of the modules in the course. So this is Module 1, Lecture 3, the reporting on research and authorship, and we are very likely, actually I'm planning to split it into 2 separate lectures, one on reporting research, documenting research, and the second on authorship. And this discussion of record keeping, and we'll talk about from record keeping to publishing in a general sense still, although there will be some specifics about each, and we won't talk about actually doing the research in between. That's the next module that we'll move on to. But the documentation of responsible research, the record keeping, is especially important to me today and to the UTSA campus, because there are representatives from the Center for Disease Control on campus this Thursday, September 14th, is it? Of 2005, get my days right here. Hello, now that I have you thoroughly confused about the date, where they're inspecting our second BSL Bioscience Level 3 laboratory facility, and as well doing their first annual inspection of the first one that was approved a year ago. And they have, as a requirement, to see all of the documentation, especially for the utilization of the facility, but the storage and containment and destruction of any of the microorganisms that are evaluated in there, all of the animal records, their appropriate disposal. So a broad range of records that go way beyond just recording the actual experiment, so you can get data and then produce a report and go on to publish. So to me today, talking about record keeping extends beyond the text within the slides that we have prepared to all types of record keeping, common user facilities, whether it's just at a level 2, the most general type of research laboratory that you would see at biosafety level 2, biosafety level 3, working with agents that are not extremely high risk of contagiousness to humans and animals. And of course, we don't have a BSL biosafety level 4 at UTSA, or I think even in the city. There are very few of those, such as at the CDC. So in this era of bioterrorism, having a BSL-3 lab, 2 BSL-3 labs on our campus is really quite an accomplishment. So then the training on record keeping becomes even more important in that context, but as well, any type of research should be recorded by these standards that we discussed today, because you never know when something might arise or emerge that possibly could be patented. And it's within that context that we discuss the information today. The textbook has a bit of information on good laboratory procedure, and I'll prepare a separate lecture on that, pre-record it, and post that as well with some of the other supplemental lectures that we've been having. There's specialized training that individuals can go through to get certified in good laboratory practice, and it's definitely something that you should investigate if it's not familiar to you, and you plan to get very serious about science and considering any of your work leading toward patent and licensing. Some of the faculty in the biology department actually are working on master's degrees in business in order to prepare themselves better to make a transition into the business aspect of science and protecting their own interests and sharing those interests with the institution. So it's the laboratory notebook that is essential evidence of the date of conception of any idea. I think the funniest story, although very serious, I have for this course is a semester I was teaching it where we had just completed the lecture on the notebook, and the discussion about the institution owning that information, that you're responsible and accountable to the institution for that institutional property. And the next lecture, between that lecture and the next lecture, I went to the men's room in the science building, and there was a sign on there, "Did anybody see my laboratory notebook? I think I left it in here a couple days ago and I can't find it." And it was actually one of the students in the class, so we all had a good time teasing that individual for taking the notebook from the laboratory, which you're never supposed to do, only under the rarest of circumstances, and you never lose your primary record. So that's the example that we have, and it's got a little bit of humor in it, but it's very serious. We leave the laboratory with the notebook, primary record for the laboratory, probably in more instances than what we might remember in just sitting here. If you're in a research facility where you use common user facilities, you may be bringing that primary record with you from room to room. And definitely it's one of the major responsibilities in the research laboratory to have that primary record and protect it for its full value. So we'll run through some suggestions for keeping a laboratory notebook. It is obviously the permanent record, as I was saying. There has to be a primary permanent record, and it indeed is, by social standard at least. I don't know if there's any law written specifically for it, but there's a strong social and professional standard that permanent record belongs to the institution where the research was performed, and typically that would be the same institution that received money externally, extramural money, to support the research in the facilities at that institution. In the textbook, there's a discussion about how long records should be kept, and that the ideas that the federal government should begin this archive, this global archive that would contain all the records for all the federally supported research ever, kind of a thing, which is really quite amazing to try to envision how they would ever collect all of that together. And that institutions should also have these types of archives. It's extremely rare, especially that academic institutions would have copies of the researchers' primary, even if it would need to be the original, and then a photocopy of it in the laboratory of the scientist, to have the collective laboratory notes for all the students, all the trainees, doctoral students, undergrads, masters, postdocs, and everything, tucked away in some big gigantic building, and still a record provided for the research laboratory on an indefinite basis. The authors note that the present standard and requirement by the federal government is that similar for any type of accounting, it's more financially based than it is research based. You have to keep the permanent record at least to the 3-year end point after having provided the final financial report to the funding agency. In this case, it would be the federal government. So 3 years is not very long. You still might even be audited beyond 3 years. So for the research part of it, if somebody was to challenge one of your research reports or anything of that nature, you would have to somehow produce those records. So the authors are suggesting keeping it as a permanent record for at least 7 years after submitting the final financial report, which accompanies, of course, the final research report to the funding agency. Finally, the authors state that these typically are permanent. Researchers tend to cling to things and probably have the first notebook that they ever started to record their research activities. So there's a broad range of settings where we might picture it being impossible to save all the records forever, even in a research laboratory. You run out of space. So 8, 10-year-old notebooks probably are thrown away. But we have to keep in mind this permanent accountability and responsibility for our work. If we publish it and make it public in any way, then that is a permanent public record. We know we can go and do a search on literature back in the 50s and 60s and find old journals such as that, and some that even go beyond that. So we are accountable for what we provide as public record of our work. So how long do we have to keep all the evidence, all the microscope slides or photographs or digital images and things like that, is a serious concern. And it has to be within reason. So obviously 3 to 7 years. These are permanent, so they've got to be permanently bound pages. A spiral or a comb notebook or comb bound books are not suitable for permanent records, and especially in court. You can't determine if a page has been removed from a notebook or a spiral, 3-ring type of a binder where you can open it and add pages. That creates a problem as well. So permanently bound pages is the only acceptable and legal type of notebook. All entries have to be made in ink. It's supposed to be the acid-free paper and particular types of inks that would be mentioned here in a moment. So the notebook contains the register of your activities, and it's supposed to be really quite exhaustive and exhausting to be able to do it. And the challenges to anyone that works in a research laboratory, some of you may have clinical laboratory experience where record keeping is possibly even more extensive, and with official signatures and forms and things like that oversee the compliance. There's really no ongoing inspection for compliance in the research notebook, and the challenges to each of us in asking ourselves, just how thorough are we in keeping our notebook records, and do we do everything that we'll see in the upcoming slides. So it's the source of data which corroborates your hypotheses, and it will serve as the basis for your publications. Therefore, you are responsible for it. This is the reason we have notebooks. We don't have notebooks, good notebooks, that are preserved permanently to protect ourselves from any potential harm in the future. I know that sometimes I present information first with what bad thing can happen, so what must you have or have done to protect yourself or prevent that. And I am sometimes accused of having the wrong moral standard of saying I do things ethically to protect myself from harm and being punished. and please understand that it's just my general way of my general approach of presenting things. What's the worst possible scenario? How are you protected from that? And then what do we do that is the standard that keeps us from getting into trouble? And then remind ourselves that we do it because we're dedicated and responsible scientists and researchers. We don't just do things to keep ourselves from getting into trouble. But we need to understand first that there can be serious trouble. Today, if the CDC is unsatisfied with the record keeping of the BSL-3 that's been in use for a year, it'll probably be shut down if they're not doing it properly. It could be severe enough where it's shut down. Any research that they've got going on in there would have to be terminated immediately. So it can be that serious in that sense. It's even more serious if for some reason somebody challenges, could be just one figure in one of your publications, and you don't have good records to back it up. You could be in real serious trouble if you can't provide the documentation to protect yourself. What other conclusion can there be other than that you're guilty? You're guilty in that you can't defend yourself completely. So it also contains the protocols you used to obtain those results. And this is what I try to get people to understand, is that this is your best record to turn back to, because if you're trying to develop things, or if for some reason you had to use a different reagent because you're in the middle of the experiment, if you don't note it, it's just not going to come to your mind. You can go back and look at every step that you recorded, every day that you worked on that experiment, and if something goes wrong or if something goes right where it didn't go right before, you really can get a thorough accounting of every variable that you were trying to work on and make sense of it. You'll see this happening all the time. Protocols are not recorded completely, especially if you're in a lab where you're involved with training undergraduate students and some master's students that don't have lab experience as well. You know, you get results that are variable and nobody can account for it until finally you get to somebody and they say, well, no, I wasn't putting that amount in there. I didn't have that same amount in every one of the samples, so I was putting different amounts in. Did you write it down? No, I didn't. Just these types of things will be happening all the time. Obviously, if you're a highly trained professional responsible for the laboratory, that shouldn't be happening to you, but it just emphasizes and provides a prime example in the setting such as UTSA where that would be important. If you're working in a laboratory with a microorganism that's a potential tool for bioterrorists, and somehow a quantity of that was your responsibility, and someone checked and there was a certain amount of it missing and you were responsible for it, you could be in big trouble in today's world, possibly end up in prison. So that attention to every single detail. This is the reagent I used, the lot number, the source, possibly even the catalog number, at least someplace along the way in the notebook. So it's all self-contained. You don't just assume, well, I'll refer to the spec sheet. So you would know different lot numbers of chemicals behave very differently. Those of you that work in the labs, you know that tremendously. So if all that information isn't recorded in the notebook, then you never really can make sense of data that might have some inconsistencies with it. If everything works beautifully and you get beautiful results, and then sometimes it's good to go back and look at the notebook too, because that might be too believable. But if it is real, then it's really nice. You don't have to be concerned. But if data looks too beautiful, it should also make you question as well. So we can never emphasize the importance enough. It is the only recognized means for establishing an actual date of an invention, or even the first time that you come up with an idea. When we talk about ownership of ideas and information, and whether or not you own your own ideas, we will discuss as well how to be aware of keeping your ideas to yourself and any potential for profit on those. Not that I'm, again, here I go presenting it as if that should be your motive, but it should be something that you have in mind and you should need to understand the arrangements that you have professionally with a research institution or the institution that you work with, and under what conditions do they have any type of ownership, and what conditions do you have ownership, and how does that work? So if you have a great idea and you record it on campus in your laboratory notebook, then it is from that point on the property of the institution. Your idea recorded in a notebook, a research notebook in the institution, now belongs to the institution. So if it led to a discovery that created billions of dollars of profit, a large portion of that would likely go to the institution and not to you. So it's important to realize that. The other one is to have a good notebook, is the possibility of being audited. It does happen. So as I said, it's happening here. It's not an auditing, but basic, the formal type of auditing that seems like a penalty. But there are annual reviews in some cases where it truly is an audit of the record keeping and the notebooks. So the entry should show to which project the work applies, include all formula, diagrams, sketches of circuits. So basically anything related to it is supposed to be in the notebook, and especially it could just be strategies for improving the experimental method with the reagents that are available. That should be in the notebook as well. It's rare in our disciplines to have circuits or some type of thing that's going to be built and tested. It's more of an idea that's going to be developed and tested. But the idea must be represented as well. Diagrams and sketches should have information to identify and explain the subject matter. So if you're sitting and having discussions, it should be recorded in the notebook. Typically we go to a chalkboard to show the whole group, and by the standards we've just presented, that's inappropriate unless somebody is recording it in their notebook and it's documented. So you can see that it can just become this gigantic thing. I'm going to be spending all my time recording every single thing in the notebook. So there has to be a choice by individuals, and the individuals especially responsible for the research laboratories, as to how closely they will police the comprehensive record-keeping process. Another investigator, by examining the entries, should be able to determine the nature of the project. So this is a part of what I have difficulty getting trainees to understand, is that you need to start it off with a description of the project that you're working on, state the hypothesis, a little bit of information about the experimental design, and then go on with the record keeping. So it should be self-contained. But it's right here in the research proposal. We know exactly what to do because we just turned to the research proposal. Well, there still has to be something in the notebook to pull it all together, rather than just a description of the things that you did and some of the data. It has to be self-contained in that context. So when it started, what ideas were considered, what compounds made, or circuits, equipment, and again, that's less likely for our type of work, but anything that might be an outcome, a creation, emerging from the research has to be recorded. The results, obviously, and the dates for everything, and the observations, however they may be, if they're anatomical, or some type of a description, if records are made, like capturing images digitally, the file name should be placed in the record in the notebook for that, and then any conclusions should be in the notebook as well. And again, I don't know how everyone does their notebooks, but as I go through this series of slides every semester, I still see, well, I don't do that, and I don't do that. So, as I said, we make our own individual decisions on what should be in there. There's no steadfast rule that this absolutely must be there, that absolutely must be there. I challenge myself, if I was going to look at my laboratory notebook for a completed project, would I find the file name of every digital image that I captured in there? Probably not, but in some other related record that should be cross-referenced, I should have it there. And in the final report, they are all there, and so on and so forth. So you have to be sure that you can account for all of the data that you include in your report. Whether or not your notebook is absolutely complete and comprehensive is open for debate, and certainly will be debated if your reports, your work is challenged and your notebook is audited. Here's a challenge for everyone. Sign and date the pages when full, every single page. Don't leave any blank areas on a page. I think most of us are good about that. Or do we have blank areas in our notebook saying, oh, I'll go back and put that information in there later, so I'm going to give myself half a page. So that obviously is something that we are not supposed to do. We're supposed to set aside enough time each day to record each page fully and put in everything that we should be putting in to the record. At least one other worker who is competent to understand the work should regularly examine and witness the entries by signing and dating each page examined. This person should not be a co-worker or joint inventor. So I wonder how many people are doing that in this institution on a regular basis. In biotech companies where they have the certification, the training, and the good laboratory procedure and things like that, you can bet that they're following these procedures and that they set aside for their employees each day to accomplish these goals, because if you do come up with something that could possibly be marketable and worth millions or billions of dollars, you want to be sure that nobody can take it away from you. So in a biotechnology setting, in the private sector, I would expect every laboratory to have perfect notebooks. In academic settings, it'd be less so, and I can tell you that for most of my studies, I don't have somebody sign every single page when I complete it, but I haven't patented anything yet or attempted to either, so I guess I'm all right. All letters, sketches, photos, charts, or computer printouts pertinent to the project should be permanently put in the notebook with your initials and the date. So this is extremely important. Now, some things, such as certain types of procedures for looking at proteins, an example is Western blot. You end up with a membrane that might be stained, or a membrane that actually has your sample on it but doesn't stain because you use some other type of imaging process to capture an image generated by it. All should be in there, but you might have to take those out at a later time to do something else with them, maybe to rescan or to strip it or do whatever you would need to do. So permanently affixing those to a page in the notebook might not be the best thing to do. So you might put it into some type of a pocket in there that is sealed, but the membrane in that example would have to be thoroughly labeled so that it could be identified specifically. So the notations should be made of the progress and the completion of compounds, assemblies, or models which are being prepared for testing. Those entries should be obviously made as clear as possible, reference to a previous sketch as to how the compound or equipment is being made. So cross-references to other storages, to other pages should be very specific. The date of the successful testing or completion of an experiment on a research project or some type of method set up or whatever it might be. The reduction to practice is the term here, is really important. So if you achieve a milestone that is significant and creates opportunity, obviously, for producing data more readily and more reliably, that's the reduction to practice. It has to be noted. It may be a methodological modification that's possibly patentable and could be licensed for sale as well. So we have to keep all of that in mind. Notations of the tests got to be made. The compound, things being identified, comments concerning the results of the tests. So any hesitations to interpret or to conclude are supposed to be present and recorded. There's tables of the test data, if possible, entered by hand. If not, obviously you've got to have a printout from your computer program and contained within. Never erase, cross out, and it isn't scratching out completely. It's just a cross out and sometimes initialed and dated, and then the new entry made. Should not be changed at a later date. So coming back 2 days later or even the next day to change an entry is unacceptable. The error should be detected at the time and corrected at the time. If you do find one a little bit later, you've got to make a brand new entry on a new page, within a new page if necessary, and all the appropriate type of cross-referencing, justification, rationale, reasoning, and everything indicating the change. So here's a sample page from a notebook that I purchased from the website that I provided the link to on the first slide in this lecture. And you can see the format of it. You can generate a table or a graph or illustration very nicely on this. You still have lines for recording information. It doesn't obliterate the lettering so as not to be able to read it. It has permanent page numbers, but you might have notations of continuation from one page to the next. You got a title page, project number, book number, witnessed and understood by me. This is where you'd get that signature, the date, invented by, recorded by, and then the actual date for the recording of the information altogether. So you're coming from some page number and going to some page number, so there's plenty of detail just to document the actuality of linking from one page to the next and all the information and the responsibility and credit given to individuals on every single page. So as I said, it's very easy to reach a point where you're thinking, I'm spending hours a day just on my notebook. So everybody has to come up with a reasonable endpoint deciding what should be in the notebook. So shoulds and should nots. A good legal laboratory notebook should not be spiral bound or of any type of binding that allows easy page ripping off or out. So if it's permanently bound, you tear out a page, that page removal can be detected. The notebook should be bound with numbered pages, preferably with a hard, durable cover, and as I said, the neutral pH paper. It should open flat on the bench to encourage writing or pasting on it. Should be numbered for easy identification and reference on the outside of it. Good numbering system is one in which the laboratory provides the notebooks and they are numbered consecutively to begin with, regardless of who gets a certain number. So for example, all the notebooks were numbered beforehand and individuals receive different ones and it's recorded who had what notebook by this gross number, and then of course each individual or researcher gets to number their own book in addition to that central record, and of course some type of encoding that reflects the research project and the the actual experiment and maybe even the experiment number or sample number. So ideally and particularly when working on something that could derive in a patent, the pages of the notebook should be signed by the researchers and a witness. If they are not signed, it could mean that you encounter challenges if you attempted to patent. Of course, the entries have to be made in ink, so there's a China ink or India ink that is the best and most permanent, but also the typical fountain pen or that has permanent ink works as well, that we most commonly use. You never use pencils. You have to avoid using any kind of colored ink of any type because there are dyes that can fade with time. The Sharpies, obviously they're permanent, but they tend to bleed through from page to page and can fade in time, so there are obvious problems with that type of approach. If you have any type of computerized protocol, then you've got to print and paste them in the notebook, so really good glue so it won't be falling off. Same goes for any data that was printed out, tables, raw data in tables, processed data in tables, graphical data, printout, the actual printout from maybe a radioactive counter or some type of instrument. Original is to be permanently pasted into the notebook. So again, it has to be self-contained. Everything is supposed to be in there. So if in your research you establish correspondence with people in other laboratories, the notebook should be the repository of the communications. Usually those have valuable information about something that you are considering with those individuals. It might be methodological, it might be based upon some reagent or cell line, or even the nature of the agreement that you reach with them. You can use this. I don't expect collaboration, I don't expect co-authorship, all of those types of things that link the interactivity with commitments and responsibilities. So it is an asymmetrical entity. Both the protocol and results are included in the notebook, and most people would suggest a linear arrangement of those, protocols first, then results, although sometimes protocols involve more than the directions to perform the procedure. Sometimes they're the preparation of the solutions, other materials, and reference documents as well. So you may even glue in the spec sheet for the reagent on a page and have that included as well, so that at the times when you use that reagent and you refer to the spec sheet, you have the page number and all that, so it could be very complete. Those of you with experience of working in the lab know that you can get very different results from different sources, and you can find a source for a reagent that works beautifully, and then all of a sudden you order it again and it just stops working, or just is giving you horrible, dirty data. Then that lot number becomes very important in the record. So we can, the methods described below are more flexible for the needs of the researcher at the bench and consider certain problems. So you leave 1 or 2 blank pages to elaborate the table of contents, which is typical at the beginning. You can't anticipate how many actual pages you need for a table of contents, but it should be there. Make sure to date the experiments, and of course in the U.S. we use month, day, and year, but the vast majority of people around the world put day, month, and year, so that should be established so there can be no confusion on the date. So give experiments numbers. So 11-7, measurement of alpha amylase activity in the presence of okadaic acid. The subsequent pages will be noted as 11-7 continued. So some way of providing a unique identifier for your experiment is extremely important It'll be easier for you to refer to your experiments later when you're writing papers, and especially for being accountable for the data that you produce. The use of odd-numbered pages only to write or trace protocols and instructions, so you leave every other page blank. To insert contents is extremely important. You got to have a brief statement of the purpose, as we said. Some information on the background is usually a good idea too. You can use the even number pages for the recipes, the preparation of solutions, buffers, media, all that kind of stuff. And for the entry of the results, handwritten or printouts. So one way or another, odd pages for this, even pages for that. It's usually a pretty good way of doing it. So it really can be an asymmetrical record, because sometimes it's difficult to start at page 1 and just have everything go in perfect sequence. You may have the results on a later page if you don't use alternating pages to reserve a blank page and things like that. So obviously I expect people to check with their laboratory supervisors on the standard approach for the lab and expected by the PI for the lab in the record keeping. So on these pages you can also paste your reference material, the spec sheets, like I said, from the manufacturers, notes from other researchers, results from your data bank research searches, any kind of diagram, ideas for new strategies. Obviously, endless list of things that can be in there. So you can always check your protocol and your results at a glance, and you will have space to paste other important materials for your research activities. And I'm going to stop on that slide where we begin to talk about the scientific communication, publication, and we'll pick up from this point in the next lecture. So I appreciate your time and attention.